Hello, this is Laurel Ruma from O'Reilly Media. And today I'm with Kim Rees, who is the head of data visualization at Capital One and is a frequent public speaker. She also co founded Periscopic, a design firm that strives to do good with data. Hello, Kim.
Hi, Laurel.
Great to have you today. So I think we'll start with a very simple question. What is, to you, the difference between a leader and a manager?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have a great example or a great definition of that, but I recently saw something on Twitter that I absolutely love in that regard, and I'll read it to you directly. So the quote is, "Too many people confuse management, leadership, and mentoring. Management is organizing an all-staff Christmas lunch at Pizza Express. Leadership is persuading 75% of them to go to a karaoke bar afterwards, and mentoring is gently reminding them not to try say Gangnam Style."
That's great.
Which I laughed at, and then I was thinking, there's so much truth in that. Maybe not that exact example, although I think it's a great example, but in terms of, the approach to management, it's sort of the nuts and bolts of getting things done and making sure that, all the oars are turning in the right, or pushing in the right direction. And leadership is, getting people to see the bigger picture and have a greater vision and see themselves as part of their own team as well as part of the larger organization and how they fit in and contribute.
And then mentorship is just that hard thing that we probably all try to strive to be good at, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think also is it sort of exists whether or not you're a leader or a manager. Mentorship can take place. And I guess leadership can at any level too. But mentoring, I think, is also just the bond that you form with people and the ability to see the strengths in people and where they can best use those and to gently guide them either, towards those things they can be successful at or away from those things where they're going to, not contribute as well or not show up as well.
So, how long have you been a manager? What was your kind of path to being where you are now like?
Yeah. So I was at Periscopic for 13 years. And when we started, it was just my co-founder and me. And a couple of years in, I was the programmer in the business. And after a couple of years in, I realized that I couldn't really do it all my own anymore because we were getting so much work. So it was just out of the necessity to get the work done. Is how I started hiring people to do the extra, pick up the extra work. And I almost didn't see myself as a manager because it was, in a startup environment, I think there's a lot of, everybody's sort of all hands on deck kind of mentality. And so I didn't see myself as a manager for a long time. And, it wasn't until I had, 3 or 4 people under me and I was doing less programming that I recognized that I was a manager. And so I did that throughout my career at Periscopic. And then that led me to Capital One, where I was sought for the role of heading up a team for their data visualization department. So it was, again, it's sort of a similar path internally at Capital One, where I was starting over from scratch again, hiring out a new team, although this time I went in knowing that I would be a manager. So, which was incredibly interesting for me because I recognized it going in and it was, I could have a better plan in place for like how I was going to approach things as opposed to just sort of taking things on as they came up.
So that actually is an interesting point, sort of that tension between being a technical contributor and then finally having sort of enough work. Was that sort of the turning point that you just had too much work and you couldn't actually be the programmer as much as you wanted to be and you had to take on this management role?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. So that was, it was interesting because on the one hand, I had the same feeling that I think a lot of programmers have going into management where you want to do everything yourself. You enjoy it. It's, there's a lot of benefit from having the control of all of your code and knowing that you're the only one touching it and you don't have to worry about how other people are going to read it or use it or you're going to have to explain yourself and your coding style and all of that. But there was also it was really liberating. And it was, for me, going into the management role, I very quickly recognized that, the strength of having other people working with me was a huge benefit. And so I quickly became an advocate for delegating work to, the most suitable person for it. And throughout my career, I've really enjoyed that aspect of it.
So now that you get to build your own team at Capital One, how did you approach that? You're kind of thinking like, were you going to be a somewhat percentage of a technical contributor, or are you really focusing on the business of the job?
Really focusing on the business side of things. So I recognize that it's been a long time since I've really
Hmm.
contributed technically. And although I enjoy it and I still understand it and I can still speak that language, which I think is great for anyone leading a technical team to be able to speak their language. So that's, what I see as, still my connection to the programming world is, that I can sit down and I can look at code. I can, hear what people are saying. I can, help people settle arguments, those types of things. But in terms of building out this new team, it was really more focused on how are we going to approach this as a discipline at a large organization? Where can we where can we contribute the most in the company? Where can we have the most impact? Where can data visualization really shine and really allow people to see things differently at the organizational level? So I'm focused more on the business side and the strategy and vision for the team, and hiring out a team of creative, designers, programmers, data scientists, and the like. And it's incredibly exciting. I love to watch the team grow and just see how we can all shine and how all the puzzle pieces fit together.
And it's so nice to, like, as you said, see the strengths of other people really come through and like work as that singular group to make the entire business better. And also service customers, right? Which is probably a large part of your focus.
Absolutely. So Capital One's mission is to change banking for good. And so the humanity that I've always been, preaching about in terms of my own approach to data visualization and bringing things back to the human scale really fit in so perfectly with Capital One. And I absolutely love coming to work every day where people they're so moved by that mission that it shows up every single day. We just brought on a social scientist onto our team who has the most incredible perspective on how our work affects people and how people can benefit from visualization. But, our work is, working in visualization, but also the different aspects of the company and how we help or hurt people. So it's just an incredible place to be. And I again, going back to how the team fits together, it's just so exciting to, you add one new piece to the puzzle and it just adds a new level of engagement, a new perspective, a new way of doing things. So it's just so much fun.
So stepping back a little bit, when you were newly kind of crowning yourself a manager and taking on more responsibilities, can you think of obstacles that you managed to overcome? It seems like you were very aware that once you figured out delegation was good, that was a good thing to explore. So what else in delegation were some of those kind of first hard lessons that you figured out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's hard to think back to specific times in Periscopic, and also because I didn't really see myself as a manager. I think some of those are harder to sort of relate to. But just recently, something came up that I'm sure a lot of people go through, but was really new to me, having built out my own company with my business partner and then coming into a company where I was again building out my own team. I recently adopted another team from a different part of the company, different part of our design org. And that was a huge challenge because at first I was like, wow, this is amazing. I love the team. They're doing really interesting work. And I was super excited to have them on. And then once the reality hit of, okay, this is a new team, I didn't hire any of these people, which was, I've never dealt with that before. I've never managed someone that I didn't hire. So that was just fascinating to think about. The head of their team is on parental leave right now, and the team is across the country in San Francisco. So when the reality of that hit, I was like, oh my God, why did I sign up for this? This is crazy. But situation that a lot of people find themselves in as new managers of maybe an existing team or taking on more people that are so. But for me, it was really interesting. I'm realizing that, this team has been around for, I think, 2 or 3 years doing their own stuff. They have a different culture. They have different norms. They have different communication style. I mean, it's showing up in our daily, projects and the way we work together. So it's fascinating to sort of work through those. And, I kind of see it again as a puzzle to solve. Like, how do I sort of step into a leadership role with this team? What are the things that I have to do to, establish myself as a leader, but also as as a comrade, as a, person who's part of their team? And how can they, want them to know that they can come to me to strategize on, how to best leverage what they're, working on. So, so it was a really interesting challenge to take on this new team.
And I think that's something people don't necessarily talk a lot about is the changing dynamics of your team. People come and go, and then you absorb other teams. And your call as a manager and a leader in the organization is to do whatever is needed that the organization needs you to do at that time. So while you're covering for this person who's on leave and absorbing the team, you're also formulating what this team looks like in the next 12 months and how you can all work together to build a great product for the company.
Right, exactly.
So how do you know you're a good manager? What kinds of things do you do, or do you read up much on certain books or leadership styles?
Yeah, I did a lot of reading and when I was at Periscopic about that. I think on the one hand, I was, trying to figure it out, like what is a good leader and, what makes a good manager and how do I do this? So there were how do I just function as this person? And then the other side of it was also validation that, I wanted to look for validation that I was doing something okay. So I was looking for, other leaders who are like me so that I could see, am I based on my own strengths and my own way of doing things? If I find other people like that and we're sort of doing the same things or we're getting the same results, then I can relate to that person. I think not all books and not all management styles speak to everybody. So it can sometimes be a challenge to find those avenues where you can find a role model or find literature that speaks to your style. So I spent a fair amount of time doing that and figuring that out. And then as far as being a good manager, knowing that one is a manager, I don't think that personally, I don't know if I am or not. I think nobody really actually knows for sure. And as far as feedback goes, I don't ever, you get explicit feedback from your boss or from your direct reports, and those things are good. But those are the things I really look for. I look more for signals that what I'm doing is working. And in those the signals that I'm looking for are more on the performance side. Like the team dynamic is really a big one for me. Like if the team is functioning well, then I take that as an indicator that I'm doing okay, or at least I'm giving them enough space to have a good dynamic. So if they're doing great, if they are working together, if they have strong communication, if they're celebrating each other, if they're showing up as leaders themselves, that to me is the biggest win. So those are the things that I look for. Not so much direct feedback about myself, but just in terms of like, if the team is doing great, then I'm doing something right.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a very kind of shared success model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what two pieces of advice do you have for people who are new managers or thinking about what that path would look like?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think also a little bit going back to the team dynamic. So setting the tone is huge. I find that especially now at a large organization, there are teams that show up in like just an incredibly helpful, like, how can I serve you kind of way. And there are teams that show up as sort of isolated or not that willing to work together. You get all different flavors of teams. So it's up to the manager to really set that tone and lead by example, right? Because that's the way the team is going to show up. And they are the reflection of you, right? So the way that you want to be perceived in your organization is what you have to create within that team. So it's really the culture of your team and how that connects to the wider organization, right? So setting that tone and leading by example, and also not being afraid to say, hey, you're not showing up the way that you need to. We got to sit down and talk about this, right? So, and then just sort of instilling that throughout the daily cadence or the weekly cadence of the team. What types of things do you bring to your space? And sometimes it's, you have to be a cheerleader, and it's, it can be exhausting, right? So, but the culture, I think, is the biggest thing. And once that is sort of instilled in the team, it just breeds throughout the team. Anybody new who's joining, it's sort of anybody who's hired is sort of looked at through that lens. So it becomes easier over time. The second thing I would say is that because managing is exhausting and because it's not there's not a lot of glory in being a manager. You don't really get celebrated as being, a manager. I mean, if you do, some companies do, but it's not celebrated as much as like the tangible wins for the company. So I think that to maintain the energy of being a manager and to also share in the company wins, you really have to stay on top of like celebrating the wins of your team, right? So if somebody gets promoted, or if you do a project that has a huge impact, or so in the case of our team, some of our work is being used by our senior leadership, celebrate that and make sure to let people know about it and let people know that you love their work. And, that camaraderie, I think, that comes out of that can really lift everybody's spirits, but also yours as a manager, because it lets you celebrate the wins as your own, even when you might not be directly involved in something. It gives you that energy to keep going.
That's excellent. Kim, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Laurel. It's a pleasure.